The homeless boy was offered a job. It sounded like the first good thing that had ever happened to him. A man in a clean shirt approached him on a Tuesday morning, right there on the bench where he slept, and said he was hiring. Said it paid well. Said all he had to do was show up. No one had ever said something like that to Eli before. He was 12 years old, and for the past 14 months, the bench outside the old lumber yard on the edge of Tucson had been the closest thing he had to a home. Tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. Click the like button. And let's begin. Eli's real name was Eli Navarro. He remembered that much even on the mornings when everything else felt like it belonged to someone else's life. His parents, his old bedroom, the school where he used to get decent grades without trying. His mother, Grace, had worked double shifts at a hospital laundry for years. Her hands were always dry, the kind of dry that comes from hours in chlorine and steam, and she kept a small jar of cream by the kitchen sink that she rubbed into them every night before bed. She kept a photograph of her own mother on the kitchen counter, and every night before Eli went to sleep, she would tap it once with 2 fingers and whisper something in Spanish he could never quite hear. He asked her about it once when he was maybe 8. She smiled and said, "I'm telling her good night." Then she kissed the top of his head and turned off the light. His father, Daniel, had disappeared when Eli was 6. Not dramatically. Not with a fight or a door slamming. He simply didn't come back from a trip one Thursday, and Grace never spoke about it again. There was a photograph of him somewhere. Eli had seen it once in a shoebox in the closet, but Grace never took it out and Eli never asked. For a long time it was just the two of them. And that was enough. More than enough. Grace had a way of making small things feel like the whole world. A walk to the corner store on a Sunday morning, a movie on the couch with the blanket they shared, the way she sang off-key to the radio while she folded laundry. Eli didn't know they were poor. Not really. Not in the way that word means when you look back on it later. He just knew that his mother was there every single day, and that her presence made everything else bearable. Then, 11 months before Eli found the bench, Grace got sick. It started small. A cough that wouldn't go away. Then the fatigue. Then the bills, mountains of them, white envelopes that arrived every single day, piling up on the kitchen counter next to the photograph of Grace's mother. Eli didn't understand all the numbers. But he understood what happened when Grace couldn't pay them. They lost the apartment in March. Grace tried to hold on. She moved them into a single room at a boarding house on Fletcher Street. She kept working when she could, but some weeks she couldn't get out of bed at all. Those weeks Eli went hungry. Not starving. Not the kind of hunger that makes the news. The quiet kind. The kind where you learn to drink water until your stomach stops complaining. One evening in late April, Grace sat Eli down at the small table in their room. The light from the single bulb made shadows under her eyes that looked like bruises. "Eli," she said, and her voice was the calmest he had ever heard it. "If something happens to me, you need to go to your Aunt Clara in San Antonio." Eli didn't ask what she meant by, "if something happens." He already knew. She wrote the address on a piece of notebook paper and folded it into his jacket pocket. 2 weeks later, Grace was admitted to the hospital. Eli visited her every day after school until the school told him he couldn't come anymore because it was after hours. Then he sat in the waiting room until the nurses told him to leave. On a Saturday in May, a nurse with kind eyes and a tired voice told Eli that his mother had passed during the night. He didn't cry. Not then. He sat in the plastic chair for a long time, holding the folded piece of paper with Aunt Clara's address, and felt something inside him go very, very quiet. The system moved fast after that. A social worker named Mrs. Daniels came to the boarding house and explained that Eli would need to be placed somewhere. Foster care. A group home. Something. But Eli had already made a decision. That night, he climbed out the window of the boarding house with nothing but a backpack, a change of clothes, the photograph of Grace's mother, and the folded address, and disappeared into Tucson like a drop of water into sand. He found Aunt Clara's number online at the library the next week. Called it from a payphone. The number was disconnected. He tried twice more. Same result. After that, Eli stopped looking for her. The bench outside the lumber yard became his world. He learned things quickly. Where to find water that wasn't from a gas station tap. Which dumpsters behind which restaurants had food that was still okay to eat. Which people would give you $1 and which ones would call the cops. Which nights were cold enough to need the cardboard and which ones you could sleep on top of it. He was thin. Too thin. His clothes were too small. He'd grown 2 inches since Grace bought them. His shoes had a hole in the left sole that he covered with layers of duct tape he found behind a hardware store. He was invisible. And for 14 months, that invisibility kept him alive. Until the man in the clean shirt showed up. His name, he said, was Mr. Victor Hale. He was tall, maybe 45. He had gray at his temples and a jacket that looked like it cost more than Eli had ever seen in one place. He smiled the way people smile when they want you to feel comfortable. Wide open, a little too practiced. "You're Eli, right?" Hale said, sitting down on the bench like they were old friends. Eli tensed. Nobody knew his name. "Relax," Hale said, holding up one hand. "I run a program. A work program for young people who need it. I've been watching you for a few days." That should have been the warning. But Hale's voice was smooth and even, and Eli was tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that goes deeper than sleep. And the man was offering something that no one had offered him in over a year. Work, money, purpose. "What kind of work?" Eli asked. "Warehouse work," Hale said. "Light stuff, sorting, organizing. I've got a facility outside the city. You'd start this week. I'll even give you a place to sleep while you're working." Eli looked at the man for a long time. He thought about Grace. About the way she used to say, "Eli, when something sounds too good, it usually is." But Grace was gone. And the bench was cold. And Eli was 12 years old, and no one in the world was looking for him. "Okay," he said. He didn't know yet what he was walking into. He didn't know that the warehouse wasn't a warehouse at all. And he didn't know that the job Hale was offering would take him somewhere far darker than the bench had ever been. The facility was about 40 minutes outside Tucson, at the end of a dirt road that wound through flat, empty desert. There was nothing around it, no houses, no other buildings, no signs. Just red earth, scrub brush, and heat that shimmered off the ground like a living thing. The building itself was large and low, made of corrugated metal with no windows on the outside. It looked like any number of industrial sites Eli had seen from highways. Unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of place your eyes slide right past. Hale parked and led Eli inside through a side door. The air was cool, air-conditioned, and the contrast with the burning heat outside felt almost luxurious. Inside, the space opened up into a long, wide room with concrete floors and fluorescent lights. There were tables, chairs, a kitchen area along one wall with a refrigerator and a microwave and a basket of bread. And there were other kids, 7 of them scattered around the room. Ages ranged from maybe 9 to 14. Some were eating, some were just sitting. One girl, around 10, was reading a book with her knees pulled up to her chest. They all looked up when Eli walked in. Their faces told him something before any of them spoke a word. It was a look Eli recognized from the shelter system, from the waiting rooms, from the group homes he'd walked past but never entered. A look that said, "I have been here for a while, and I am not sure I am going to leave." "This is where you'll stay," Hale said, gesturing around the room. "Get settled. There's food, clean clothes in the back. We start work in the morning." He left through a door at the far end of the room. Eli heard a lock click. Not a deadbolt. Not a padlock, just a regular lock turning. But in that moment, it sounded louder than anything Eli had ever heard. A boy about his age, maybe 11, with dark curly hair and a scar on his chin, walked over. "You just got here?" the boy asked. "Yeah," Eli said. The boy nodded slowly, like he was confirming something he already knew. "My name's Marco," he said. "Don't believe anything he tells you after tonight." Eli wanted to ask what that meant. But something in Marco's eyes told him he would find out soon enough. The first 2 days were almost normal. Hale came back each morning with boxes. The kids sorted them, clothes mostly and household items. It was simple work and they were paid a little each day. Not much. But Eli counted the bills carefully and kept them in his pocket, and for the first time in months he felt like he was doing something that mattered. The food was better than anything he'd eaten in over a year. Hot meals. Real meals. Pasta and chicken and bread that was still warm. Eli ate until his stomach ached, and for a little while the facility didn't feel like a cage. But on the third night something changed. Eli woke up in the dark to the sound of a door opening somewhere in the building. Not the main door, a different one. Deeper inside. He lay still listening. Footsteps. 2 sets, maybe 3. And voices, low, speaking too quietly to make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the tone of people doing business. Then, for just a second, he heard something else. A child crying. Distant. Muffled. Like a sound coming through a wall. Eli sat up slowly in the dark. Marco, sleeping on the mat beside him, opened one eye. "You heard it?" Marco whispered. It wasn't a question. "What was that?" Eli asked. Marco didn't answer right away. He stared at the ceiling for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet Eli had to lean in to hear it. "There are kids in the back," Marco said. "Behind the wall. Kids who don't sort boxes. The next morning, Eli watched Hale more carefully. The man moved through the facility like he owned it, which Eli supposed he did, but there was something in the way he looked at the kids. Not the way a teacher looks at students. Not the way a social worker looks at a case file. It was the way a farmer looks at livestock. Calculating. Patient. Measuring. That afternoon, while Hale was gone, Eli explored. The main room, where the kids slept and ate, was connected to a hallway at the back. The hallway had 3 doors on one side. 2 were locked. The third was a bathroom. Eli tried the locked doors. Nothing. But the second one, the one closest to the bathroom, had a gap at the bottom. Wide enough to slide something under. Wide enough, maybe, to see through if you pressed your eye close to the floor. Eli knelt down and looked. On the other side of the door was another room. Smaller. Darker. There were 2 kids in it, a girl maybe 8 and a boy who looked younger. They were sitting on the floor with blankets around them. Their faces were blank in a way that made Eli's chest tighten. They weren't sorting boxes. They were waiting. Eli pulled back from the door and sat against the hallway wall, his heart beating so hard he could feel it in his throat. He thought about Grace, about what she would have done. Grace would have found a way out. But Grace wasn't here. And Eli was, and the door to the outside was locked, and Mr. Victor Hale would be back before dark, and somewhere behind a wall, kids were sitting in the dark waiting for something Eli didn't want to think about. He stood up. He had to find a way to get word out. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. The plan came together in pieces, the way plans do when you're 12 and running out of time. Marco knew more than he'd let on. When Eli pulled him aside that evening and told him what he'd seen through the gap in the door, Marco's expression didn't change. He'd already seen it. "There's a phone," Marco said quietly. "Hale's office. At the end of the hallway past the locked doors. He leaves it on the desk sometimes when he goes out to the yard. Can we get in? The door's not locked when he's in the building. He just doesn't want us in the hallway." Eli nodded. "Then we go when he's distracted." The girl reading the book, her name was Lily and she was 10, overheard them. She looked up without expression and said, "He goes to the yard every evening around 6. Stays out there for 20 minutes. Always." "How do you know that?" Eli asked. "I've been here for 3 weeks," Lily said. "I know everything about this place." Her voice was steady. Too steady for a 10-year-old. But her eyes, when Eli looked closely, were not steady at all. That evening at 5:58, Eli watched through the small window near the kitchen as Hale walked out into the yard. The sun was going down, painting everything in shades of orange and rust. 20 minutes. Eli moved. The hallway was darker than the main room, lit by a single bulb that hummed and flickered. He passed the 2 locked doors and paused. He could hear breathing on the other side. Quiet, close breathing. Kids just a few feet away, separated by a wall. He kept moving. Hale's office was at the end of the hall. A small room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a computer that glowed blue in the dim light. And there, on the edge of the desk, exactly where Marco had said it would be, a phone. Eli picked it up with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He dialed 911. The line connected. A dispatcher's voice, calm, professional, asking him to state his emergency. Eli opened his mouth. And that's when the office door slammed open behind him. Hale filled the doorway. His face had changed. The smooth, practiced smile was gone. What replaced it was something Eli had seen before, in the eyes of people at the shelter who drank too much, in the faces of men on the street who didn't care what happened next. It was a look that said, "You are not a person to me. You are a problem." "Put the phone down," Hale said. His voice was calm. Eerily calm. The kind of calm that comes when someone has dealt with this exact situation before and knows exactly how it ends. Eli didn't put the phone down. He pressed it harder against his ear. The dispatcher was still talking, asking questions, saying, "Sir? Hello. Are you still there?" "I need help," Eli said, loud as he could. "I said put it down." Hale took a step forward. Eli said it again, faster this time. "I need help. There are kids here. Kids who are being..." Hale crossed the room in 2 strides and took the phone from Eli's hand. Not roughly, just firmly. The way you take a toy from a child who didn't understand why they couldn't have it. He looked at the screen, saw the active call, and without breaking eye contact with Eli, ended it. Then he set the phone back on the desk. "Sit down," he said. Eli sat, and in the silence that followed, something shifted in the room. The air felt different, thicker, like the walls had moved an inch closer. "You have no idea what you're involved in," Hale said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from Eli with the ease of a man having a casual conversation. And that's okay. But I need you to understand something very clearly. He leaned forward. That call went to a dispatch center. They logged it. They'll send a unit to check. And when they do, they'll find a warehouse with a few kids doing seasonal sorting work. Nothing unusual. Nothing illegal. He paused. Because everything in this building, the paperwork, the permits, the contracts, all of it is clean. I've spent years making sure of that. Eli stared at him. But the kids in the back room, Eli started. Are not in the back room, Hale said simply. Not right now. Not anymore. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eli felt something cold move through him. Where are they? He whispered. Hale smiled. Not the practiced smile from the bench. A different one. Smaller. Slower. Somewhere better, he said. Somewhere with people who pay very well for exactly what they are. Eli's hands were shaking so badly he tucked them under his legs to hide it. He thought, Grace. Grace, what do I do? And then, because he had no one else to think to, he thought, what would Grace do? And he knew the answer. She would not stop. The next 48 hours were the longest of Eli's life. Hale moved the remaining kids, Eli, Marco, Lily, and the others, to a different section of the building. A room with no windows and a single door that stayed locked from the outside. He brought food 3 times a day. He didn't speak to them. Didn't need to. The message was clear. You tried to make noise. Now we're going to be very quiet for a while. But Hale had made a mistake. He hadn't taken Eli's jacket. And in the inside pocket of that jacket, folded small and creased from months of being carried everywhere, was the piece of notebook paper with Aunt Clara's address in San Antonio. Not because Eli thought Clara could help. Her number was disconnected, her address might not even be real anymore. But because Grace had written it. And Grace, for all her quiet strength, had been a woman who believed in connections. In threads. In the idea that people who love each other leave traces, and those traces can be followed. Eli sat in the dark room with Marco and Lily and turned the paper over and over in his fingers, and he thought about traces. And then he thought about something else. The 911 call. It had lasted about 15 seconds before Hale ended it. 15 seconds was short. But Eli had said the words. I need help. There are kids here. A dispatcher had heard him say that. The call had been logged. And here was the thing Hale hadn't counted on. Dispatchers don't forget calls where a child says, there are kids here, and then the line goes dead. 3 days after Eli's call, a woman named Agent Patricia Reyes of the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit arrived at the lumberyard warehouse in Tucson. She wasn't looking for the warehouse. She was looking for something else entirely, a pattern. A thread in a case that had been building for 2 years. Missing children in the Southwest. Kids who fell through cracks. Kids with no family looking for them. Kids who disappeared so quietly that no one noticed until it was too late. The 911 call from an unregistered phone at an industrial address outside the city had flagged in a database she monitored daily. It didn't take her long to find the facility. It didn't take her long to find Hale. And it didn't take her long to understand exactly what Victor Hale had been doing for the past 4 years. Agent Reyes moved carefully. She didn't raid the facility. Not yet. Raids are loud, and loud operations sometimes scatter evidence and people. Instead, she spent 2 days building a case, coordinating with local law enforcement, tracing Hale's financial records, and mapping a network that extended far beyond one warehouse in the Arizona desert. Hale wasn't working alone. He was a recruiter, one of several, for an organization that identified vulnerable children, gained their trust with promises of work and shelter, and then moved them through a system designed to be invisible. Some children were sent to forced labor. Some were sold to families overseas. Some disappeared into channels that no one wanted to look too closely at. The system worked because it targeted kids no one was looking for. Kids exactly like Eli. On the morning of the 4th day after Eli's call, Agent Reyes and a team of federal officers and local police arrived at the facility at 5 in the morning. The operation lasted 22 minutes. Victor Hale was arrested in his office, sitting at his desk with a cup of coffee, as if he had been expecting them. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He simply looked at Agent Reyes when she put the handcuffs on and said, "You won't find anything you can use." He was wrong about that. They found everything. The first thing Eli saw when the door to his room opened was light. Real light, not the hum of a fluorescent bulb, but actual morning sun, streaming in through the hallway, golden and warm and impossibly bright. Agent Reyes stood in the doorway. She was a small woman, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back and an expression that was somehow both professional and gentle at the same time. "Eli Navarro?" she said. He nodded. "My name is Patricia Reyes. I'm a federal agent. You're safe now. All of you are." Behind her, Eli could see other officers, paramedics, a woman in civilian clothes who looked like she might be from child services. The whole hallway was lit up, and it all looked strange and almost unreal after days of darkness. Marco stood up beside him. Lily was already on her feet, clutching her book against her chest like a shield. "The kids in the back room," Eli said immediately. "The ones behind the wall. Are they?" "We're looking for them right now," Reyes said. "We have teams searching the entire facility and every location connected to it." She knelt down so she was at eye level with Eli. "You made that call," she said. "It wasn't a question." Eli nodded again. Reyes looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that Eli would carry with him for the rest of his life. "That call is the reason we're here. That call is the reason this ends today." The days that followed were a blur of questions, interviews, and paperwork, the kind of bureaucratic machinery that moves slowly but, once it starts, is very hard to stop. Agent Reyes became the person Eli trusted most in the world. She checked in on him every day. She made sure he was fed, that he had a place to sleep that wasn't a bench or a locked room. She answered his questions honestly, even the hard ones. "How many kids did Hale move through that place?" Eli asked her one evening, sitting in a temporary shelter in downtown Tucson. Reyes paused before answering. "Over 4 years, we've identified 31 children connected to his operation," she said. "Some have been located. Some are still being searched for." Eli absorbed that number. 31. "And the ones you found? At the facility? Are they okay?" "They're getting help," Reyes said. "All of them. Including you." That last part was important, because in the weeks that followed, Eli learned something he hadn't expected. That help, real help, wasn't just about being rescued. It was about what came after. A counselor named Dr. Sandra Webb was assigned to work with Eli. She was a quiet woman with glasses and a habit of letting silences sit without trying to fill them. In their first session, she simply asked Eli to tell her about his mother. And Eli did. He talked about Grace for almost an hour, about the photograph on the counter, about the whispers before bed, about the way she laughed when something surprised her. He hadn't talked about her in over a year, and the words came out like water from a broken pipe, fast and uneven and impossible to stop. When he finished, Dr. Webb nodded. "She sounds like she was an extraordinary woman," she said. "She was," Eli said. "And she raised an extraordinary son." Eli didn't cry. But something in him, something that had been locked and quiet since the day he sat in that plastic chair at the hospital, shifted. Just a little. Just enough. 2 months after the arrest, Agent Reyes called Eli with news. "We found something," she said. "In Hale's records. A name." Eli's grip on the phone tightened. "Clara Navarro," Reyes said. "Your aunt. She's in San Antonio. She moved last year, new address, new number. That's why your calls didn't go through." Eli stared at the piece of notebook paper in his hand. The address Grace had written months and months ago. Not wrong. Just outdated. "Can you find her?" he asked. "Already have," Reyes said. "And Eli, she's been looking for you. For months." The line was quiet for a moment. "She wants to talk to you," Reyes added. "Whenever you're ready." Eli folded the paper carefully and put it back in his pocket. "I'm ready," he said. Clara Navarro was a woman who looked like Grace. Same dark eyes, same way of holding her shoulders, same habit of touching things gently, like she was checking that they were real. She lived in a small house in San Antonio with a garden full of tomatoes and a cat named Pepita who slept on every available surface. When Eli walked through her front door for the first time, Clara didn't hug him right away. She stood in the hallway and looked at him. Really looked at him, the way someone looks when they're trying to see a person they've been imagining for a long time, and her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "You look like her," Clara said quietly. "You look exactly like Grace." Eli nodded. Clara held out her hand and Eli took it, and they stood there in the hallway for a while, not needing to say anything else. The adoption paperwork took 6 weeks. Clara had already begun the process before Reyes even called, had started it the moment she learned Eli was alive and looking for her. Agent Reyes helped navigate the system, cutting through layers of bureaucracy that might otherwise have taken months. Clara was patient through all of it. She came to every meeting, filled out every form, answered every question from every social worker who sat across from her with clipboards and careful eyes. She did it all without complaint, without frustration. When Eli asked her why she was doing so much work just to make it official, she looked at him for a moment and said, "Because your mother asked me to." Not out loud, but she asked me. On the day the papers were signed, Clara made breakfast, eggs and tortillas and coffee with too much sugar, and set the table for two. She put the photograph of her mother in the center of the table, between the salt shaker and the napkins. "Your mom used to do this," Clara said, tapping the frame with 2 fingers. "Every morning. It was her way of keeping us all at the table, even when some of us weren't there." Eli looked at the photograph. An older woman with a kind face and laugh lines deep around her mouth. "I know," Eli said. "I used to watch her do it." Clara smiled. And for the first time in a very long time, the table didn't feel empty. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way Eli hadn't experienced since before Grace got sick. Not the quiet of hiding. Not the quiet of a locked room. The quiet of a house where someone was home. Where the kitchen smelled like coffee in the morning and something warm in the evening. Where there was a chair at the table that was his, and a blanket on the couch that was his, and a door that locked from the inside, not the outside. Clara didn't rush him into anything. She didn't ask too many questions. She just made sure the food was there, the lights were on, and the door stayed open. Some evenings they talked for hours. About Grace, about Clara's life, about the small ordinary things that fill a home. Other evenings they sat in comfortable silence, each reading, the cat between them like a warm bridge. Eli started going back to school. A new school in San Antonio where no one knew him and no one knew his story. The first week was hard. The loneliness of being new, the strangeness of sitting in a classroom again after more than a year away. But by the second week, something shifted. A boy named James, who sat 2 seats behind him, started lending him pencils without being asked. A teacher named Mrs. Ortiz noticed he was struggling with math and stayed after class to help him, patient and unhurried, until the numbers started making sense again. It was small. All of it was small. But small, Eli was learning, was how the world got rebuilt. But Eli's story didn't end with a signed piece of paper and a warm kitchen. He thought about Marco too, and Lily. Agent Reyes kept him updated on all of them. Marco had been placed with a family in Phoenix. A couple who ran a small bakery and had 3 other foster kids already in the house. The first time Eli talked to Marco on the phone, Marco's voice sounded different. Lighter. Like someone had taken a weight off his chest that had been there so long he'd stopped noticing it. "They let me help in the bakery," Marco said. "I make the bread." Lily was harder to place. She was quiet in a way that took time to understand, not shy exactly but careful. She needed someone patient. It took 3 months to find the right family, a retired schoolteacher in Flagstaff named Mrs. Bellamy, who had a house full of books and a garden full of flowers and absolutely no rush to fix anything. Reyes told Eli that the last time she checked in, Lily was reading 2 books at a time. Eli smiled when he heard that. And then, because the smallest things change everything, Agent Reyes told him something else. Something that wouldn't let him go. "Hale's network is bigger than one man," she said. "We're still tracing it. There are other recruiters, other facilities, other kids out there who haven't been found yet." She looked at Eli steadily. "You made one phone call," she said. "And that call changed everything. 31 kids. A network that's been operating for 4 years. All of it because you picked up a phone and said the words." Eli thought about that for a long time afterward. He thought about the bench outside the lumber yard. About the 14 months of invisibility, of being a person the world looked right through. About how easy it would have been to say no to Hale that Tuesday morning. To stay on the bench. To keep surviving quietly and alone. He thought about Grace and the way she used to say that the smallest things change everything. And he thought about the kids, the ones they'd found and the ones they hadn't. 6 months after the arrest, Eli sat in Clara's living room with a notebook open on his lap. Clara was in the kitchen humming something. The cat was asleep on the couch. The afternoon light came through the window in long golden bars. Eli wrote, "Mom, I found Aunt Clara. I'm okay. I'm more than okay. But there are kids out there who don't have someone looking for them. Kids like me. Kids nobody would notice if they disappeared. I want to do something about that. I don't know what yet, but I know I have to. You always said the smallest things change everything. I think you were right. I think I'm proof." He closed the notebook and looked out the window at Clara's garden, where the tomatoes were just starting to turn red. Somewhere out there, a kid was sitting on a bench. Hungry. Alone. Waiting for someone to notice them. Eli knew that kid. Had been that kid. And he knew, with a certainty that felt less like belief and more like something deeper. Something you feel in the bones, that he was not going to look away. Not now. Not ever. The mission had begun.